So anyway, well, look, Keith, I appreciate you coming here today. Because I'm, first of all, very excited you're back in your town. I shouldn't say back in town. I am excited that you're in town, that you're at the helm, that you're leading the city. You clearly have a lot of challenges in front of you, and we'll talk about that. But I think it'd be important for you to tell a little bit about who you are. Tell me your story. You've worked a long time in Richmond. You became a city manager in Northern Virginia. But, there's a whole part of Keith Rogers that I think a lot of people would be interested in hearing because, first of all, I find it interesting, and I think you're a great guy.
Well, thank you, Mayor. First of all, thank you for having me. And this is a lovely studio. I was telling Carrie that I am a fan of the show.
Okay.
So I've seen multiple episodes. But a little bit about me, beyond my excitement just to be in Rocky Mount. I was born in Hampton, Virginia.
Right.
And I always tell people that my foray into public administration really began at a young age. My father was in private industry, but my mother was a social worker. And so she retired from the city of Hampton after 40 plus years working for the Department of Social Services.
Wow.
So throughout her career, she's the first person that really exposed me to really city management and public administration as a career. So I remember as even a probably middle school age going with her to meet city managers throughout the Tidewater area that she had come across throughout her career just through her regular duties. Mm-hmm. And so then I always knew that I was going to go to college, but while I was matriculating, I never knew where. But I took a trip to VCU and I said, this feels right. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that really secured that decision for me was the Wilder School of Government and Public Affairs. Right. So I said, if I could be in the capital of Virginia, if I could be not too far from home and not too far from Washington, D.C., I think I've got the best of both worlds for a pretty good time, as well as maybe I can get a degree that I might be able to do something with.
And some real exposure points, opportunities, both in the capital of the nation as well as the capital of the state, or the Commonwealth.
Sure. Well, and I'll tell you, I also tell people, too, that in addition to all those distinctions, I can't take much credit even for the decision to be there and flourish, because when I got the application, my mother also picked my major.
Okay.
And she said, I'm going to pick your major. You're going to be a political science major. And I'm going to tell you this one thing. You're going to be a political science major because you could do absolutely anything or you could do absolutely nothing. And so it'll be on you to figure out which is which.
Well, I was a political science major as well at Hampton City, was just down the road a little bit from Richmond. And I had to beg my father to let me be a political science major. He wanted me to be a business major. And I said, well, Dad, it's a liberal arts school, and I'm just studying theory. It's either economic theory or political theory. I can't tell that any of it is applicable to anything.
Right.
And so he finally relented. I've never heard it phrased that way. You can really do a lot with it, or you can do nothing.
Right.
It's so true. It really is so true.
Absolutely. And I think it was also good in the household to have my father, who was a business major. Mm-hmm. And so he being able to give me the balance on the other side.
Right.
And so I would say that my time at VCU was really instrumental. During that time, I was able to work at the General Assembly. Mm-hmm. I was able to work for a congressman at the federal level. And ultimately, what kept me in Richmond was I ended up getting a job with the city of Richmond. Mm-hmm. And so beyond my time at VCU, I stayed and I worked for the city of Richmond for over 10 years.
That's a great story. I enjoy that. Now, so you were at Richmond. So tell us what you did. What did you do? It's a big town, right? It's
Absolutely.
A big budget. It's the state capital. A lot of moving parts.
Absolutely.
A lot of challenges. A lot of the same challenges we have, actually.
Absolutely. I always tell people that Richmond is very unique in the country and within Virginia. There are only 3 cities that are strong mayor or that are outside of Virginia that are independent cities. Mm-hmm. And so that's a concept that other states don't always readily understand. And also within the Commonwealth of Virginia, Richmond is the only strong mayor form of government that exists, which has some different nuances than your council manager form of government.
Sure.
And so
let's go back to the independent city, because
Sure.
I'm not sure anybody listening really understands. I did spend some time in school in Virginia and have participated in some certificate of need processes up there, but it's a different concept, right?
Sure.
The city is just independent of the county. It's
Right.
It's its own separate governing entity that really doesn't have to answer to anybody but the state legislator.
Right, right. And I think that that's an important distinction, because when you talk about the issues that we all face, whether you're an independent city, whether you're Virginia, California, it's amazing how similar our issues are despite geography, demographics, etc. So I always tell people that that's a very interesting dynamic, but those are dynamics that really shape the community, because the burden for essentially comprehensive services are in that one city that you live in.
Right. So yeah, you have to replicate everything that
Absolutely.
would otherwise be provided perhaps in a county. So
Absolutely.
So it adds a whole level of complexity to the management piece, and that's the school of management that you've come from. So I just want to spend a little bit of time for folks to really understand that. So
Sure.
walk us through the experience in Richmond. I mean, what departments did you work in? Who did you work under? What did you learn? I mean, that's the period of time in your life where you get to be a sponge, right?
Absolutely.
You get to ask all the questions, and everybody is more than happy to help, hopefully.
Well, that might be a longer conversation, but it was a great time.
Yeah.
The first department that I worked in was the Office of Minority Business Development,
Okay.
and that was a separate agency. A lot of time, your small or minority or women-owned business programs are within your purchasing department or division, but in Richmond, that was a separate agency, and so that was my very first position. Also, and that gave me a great exposure at the time, because I got to interact with the business community in a way that I probably would not have had the opportunity if I just had a job within City Hall and I didn't get to get out behind the desk.
Right.
And at the time that I had that job, it was very educational for me. So then I left for a little while and I went over to work at the General Assembly.
Mm-hmm.
I worked with a legislator, and I got to really have hands-on. I had interned there before, but it was a step up, and so I got to really see the nuts and bolts of that process in a very different way. And so he retired, and then I came back, and when I came back, I worked in the city clerk's office.
Okay.
And I always tell people that the city clerk's office, it may seem like a easy job, but it is one of the only jobs where you cannot make a mistake.
You cannot make a mistake. And look, you go drive by our city hall. Whose car's in the parking lot? It's usually the finance manager and the city clerk.
Absolutely.
And more often not the city manager. So I mean, these are difficult jobs. And you're right. It looks, well, all you got to do is take notes, right?
Right.
Publish some minutes, but it's a lot more to it.
So this is the official record. So how would you like a mistake on your official record? So very important job. I got to be in that office, and the legislative process in Richmond, because of the form of government, is different. The mayor also presents legislation as well as the council members, whereas in the council manager form of government, much of even the legislative process is facilitated through the city manager's office. And so it's a great way to learn. I say strong mayor operates almost more like a president and Congress when you have like the federal level.
Right.
So working in the clerk's office, I was able to understand really the mechanics for how to get something from really a policy level and implementation level all at the same time while being in that role.
Mm-hmm.
I always tell people that I eventually was able to get over to the manager's office, and I like to tell people this story because the manager's office was across the hall from the clerk's office.
Okay.
And the clerk's office had a glass window pane where we kind of looked out into the elevator lobby, and I told everybody I must have looked real sad like a puppy dog in the window.
I'll pick that one.
Yeah, he eventually came over and asked the clerk if I could do a temporary assignment for him, and I said, we're going to start out as temporary, but I'm going to see how we can make this permanent.
Well, daggone if you didn't.
Yeah, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And so I was able to transition over to the manager's office, and throughout that time, I ended up working for 3 different managers. Mm-hmm. And so I had a plethora of various projects. But because of my role kind of being able to grow in the manager's office, I was able to go into different city departments and really get to spend time learning how they work without it being the pressure of the manager coming and asking for this.
Right.
They would probably rather talk to me than their actual boss. And so
Confident that's true.
absolutely. So I got to spend time updating the recycling program and public works and looking at things like that. At one point in time, my actual physical office was in the budget office. So I really got to spend time with the budget director and the staff there to see how they really put the city budget together and learn all of the tricks of the trade, so to speak. At a point in time, I also had a team of consultants that worked on various special projects that really didn't have a home within the various agencies. So it showed me how you can incubate a special project and really make it even before it's codified or has a home in a department. And I think also just being able to see different management styles, being skilled in transition. Really throughout my 10 years, 3 different mayors, 3 different managers. So as I'm, inheriting an organization that is me coming in is a transition, I'm familiar with how those go, what to do, what not to do. And so I would say it really is my experience has been a crash course, so to speak.
Well, yeah, and Richmond also has its own public utilities. I mean, there's a lot of similarities to what we're doing here in Rocky Mountains, and I think that's important for folks to understand is the uniqueness of really Rocky Mountain's job relative to a lot in terms of having our own utilities, in terms of a lot of the same issues that you dealt with in Richmond. So I think that's fantastic.
Absolutely. And in fact, when I visited Rocky Mount, there was very much so portions of the city of Rocky Mount that reminded me of neighborhoods within the city of Richmond. So I would say even outside of City Hall, a lot of similarities and parallels that I could draw.
I gotcha. So then from there, you worked, what was it, 10 years, 12 years? I can't remember what the number is. It's, more than a long time.
Yes,
right?
yes.
And then got the nod to go to Dumfries and become city manager. And
Absolutely. Going to Dumfries it's a small town. However, in the Northern Virginia area, you really have to look at Northern Virginia as a region. And so I would always say that Dumfries really was the gateway or the entrance where Northern Virginia began. And so when I got there, I really noticed a lot of parallels to Richmond and other places in Virginia about the things that Dumfries would need as well. And so one of the things that I've always tried to prioritize, which I'm prioritizing for the city of Rocky Mount, is I want to make sure that the house is in order.
Sure.
So I want to make sure that the council and the mayor can trust that we can go out and be bold and ambitious to deliver services and programs for the residents, because City Hall is in order. Our finances are in order. We're taking care of our people. We're prioritizing customer service. And so, as I said, various places and various stops in my career, but very much similar to types of issues and really the type of tools that make you successful. So being in Dumfries was really a excellent learning experience too. And I always tell people at this point, we're in 2023, but anybody that was in a leadership role during the pandemic, that was a trial by fire. And to be commended.
It's one thing to work with the guy who's driving the car and help, right? It's entirely another when you're driving the car yourself. And so
Absolutely.
It's a different perspective. And those couple of years, I think, probably helped shape you as a manager and as an individual and a man and all the things that are important in the development of a career.
Absolutely. I was telling someone the other day, I said, I was kind of brought up on you beat your boss to the office, you don't leave until they leave, wait another 30 minutes to make sure they're gone from the parking lot, make sure your office light is on. But in the pandemic, that was not an option. And so I had to adapt my leadership style to be able to accommodate. So I found out some staff might get their best work done between the hours of 2 a.m. and 4 a.m.
Sure.
So if that's what works best for you, and that's what is ultimately helping us deliver the best services to the resident, we need to make sure that you got a laptop so you can do that.
Absolutely.
But this is the age that we live in these days, and this is the workplace that the pandemic has left us or that we've inherited.
Oh, well, the concept of virtual office, it's been around for a while and absolutely very effective for a lot of people. However, doesn't work for everybody,
Sure,
right? Not
sure,
all jobs.
sure.
And so I have to constantly remind people of that. But, you brought something up that I thought was interesting. It's a great segue into kind of where we are today, right? You've got some holes in your staff. You inherited those. And,
Sure.
of course, Peter was not really in a position, knowing that a new manager was coming into place, to fill those slots. I mean, he could have, I suppose, but it just would have created a challenge, an unnecessary challenge. So I saw that you appointed an interim finance chief. That was one of the biggest, I would say, hole. Well, it's a hole. It is a hole.
Yes, it is.
You didn't have a CFO, basically.
Right.
And Amy had left. We've had Abdul and others, plugging the hole and filling the gap, and have done an admirable job. But they're just kind of limping along in that department at half-mast, if you will.
Yes.
So, I mean, that's an important, appointment that you made. And
Absolutely.
so, talk about some of those holes. Talk about some of those, how you're going to get the house right.
Sure.
And I think that's the thing I've been trying to communicate to folks is, look, we've got some rebuilding that we have to do. And in earnest, things are not broken.
Right.
But, you got to make sure the car can go from 0 to 60 before you try to go to 60 miles an hour.
Right. Well, I think you said an important thing, too. It's not broken.
It's not broken.
And that's important for people to understand, because I think, all of us in public service, there is a easy perception that can come about from time to time. Right. The city of Rocky Mount is in great shape, but we have a lot of challenges. And so getting the house in order, to me, finance is one of those core departments, one of those core functions. And so one of the things that I wanted to do early on, because I always laugh to myself, because I tell everybody I want to do more listening than talking, particularly early on in my first 100 days or so. But when I came in, I said, we can't say that we're serious about our finances when we have our auditor being our finance director. Right. That's not fair to our auditor.
It's a conflict.
Right. It's a conflict.
It's a big C conflict, really.
Right. So I thank them for their service and kind of holding down the fort. But that was one of the things I wanted to immediately make sure that we could adjust. So Mr. Tillery started work on Monday. He's retired from the military. He has a long career in public service, as well as in addition to his military career. And one of my favorite parts about Mr. Tillery's resume is that he, number one, is a resident of Rocky Mount, and he spent several years in various capacities in the District of Columbia government. And he was often called upon to lead a turnaround for an agency or stabilize in times of transition. And so I just felt like with his, not only his expertise, but his experience in transition and turnarounds, that was ideal. We're currently recruiting for our finance director, but that is such a critical role. We want to take all time that we need to get the right person. And so we want to make sure that they can inherit a organization that needs to go to the next level, but is in order, and Mr. Tillery can do that. And I'm very confident in that. In addition to Mr. Tillery, we also have Miss Paula Carbone, who has a long-standing city employee and has over 40 years of finance experience.
Absolutely.
And so I would really consider her the type of subject matter expert that could really be a number two to Mr. Tillery while getting the department up to speed. And the last thing that I'll say on that is the department also has great staff in other roles. They need help. They need support and they need help. And so that was the reason for the move. That was the reason for the speed at which the appointments were made. And I think that they're off to a great start, even less than a week under their belt. And so we're just looking forward to great things, especially for the finance department, for a new director to inherit.
I think it's going to be fantastic. And yeah, it's not broken. It's just not able to operate as efficiently or as effectively as perhaps you would like for it to do. So it's,
absolutely,
you got to make sure you got enough air in the tire.
Absolutely. And one thing about leadership, as you mentioned previously, is people need to know who's really, at the helm.
Right.
Anytime there is the interims, there's temporary, you're never going to be able to really go to the next level because people need some level of assurance, before of what they're getting into to really take things to the next level.
But it will get that basic blocking and tackling done, and that's really what needs to happen on a day-to-day basis. But, I understand your point. Well made. And
absolutely.
So what are the other goals that you have? I mean, clearly that was a big fill, and it's not done. It's not a completed task.
Sure.
You've just kind of brought in, somebody to fill the roster for the moment.
Absolutely. Well, I would say the next big item on my list is the public safety.
Sure.
Public safety is a priority throughout communities everywhere across the country and really the world. And so from the manager's office, I want to make sure that the chief has all the resources he needs to do his job. And so having a department that has, I won't even say the number of vacancies, I'll just say far too many vacancies in the police department, we've got to address that, and we've got to do that immediately. So one of the things that I will be sharing with you and the council in the coming weeks is a plan to immediately address the vacancies that we have in the police department. I don't think it's any secret that the bottom line is we've got to be more competitive in our compensation.
We do. And we don't think of ourselves in the market, but we're competing with the Triangle. It's an easy commute from here.
Absolutely.
And vice versa. It's an easy commute to be in Raleigh to come to Rocky Mount. So
absolutely.
So we've got to address that in the pay scale. You are doing that pay scale study. I'm excited to see what that's going to be. I know that we've mentioned it in a number of committee of the whole meetings as well as other meetings. I believe you have almost consensus support from the council in anything that we need to do to try to make that happen. I've heard that over and over and over.
Sure.
I'm happy that you're just taking that bull by the horns and again, trying to enhance what we've got.
Yes, indeed.
And it is a problem all over the state. I was reading in Business North Carolina, I guess it was maybe 2 weeks ago, but Asheville, you think of a very affluent community, had a 60% vacancy rate in their police force. I mean, that's a big number.
Yes.
So, it's not us, it's everywhere, and I've talked to lots of other law enforcement, not to be named, but everybody's suffering from this. So we've got to just get the pay scales up, we just have to. I think that's a start. I don't think that's the ultimate fix, but it's a start.
Absolutely. And really, to take the city of Rocky Mount to the next level, we want to be leaders in industry. So when we have the opportunity to take a look, with the class and comp already, the study being already underway, now's an opportunity where we can take the lead on something. And you mentioned Asheville and other communities. I would say that I inherited a very similar circumstance in Dumfries. I would say that throughout my years in Richmond, whether it was the vacancy rate or just the compensation being really not adequate to address the needs, whether it could have been even vehicles and equipment. So it's also the tools to do the jobs. This was a annual discussion, pretty much across the country, and talking to other managers. This is something that is routinely an issue, and so you just have to continually work at it.
Well, I hadn't really thought about that, but a community like Dumfries, where you're in Northern Virginia, you're competing with Alexandria, you're competing with Fredericksburg, you're competing with, and the list goes on, even Washington itself.
Absolutely.
And you're not so far from Richmond that you're not competing with some of the suburbs there too. So
absolutely,
and it's a small tax base, so you're dealing with a limited number of funds. So how did you solve that problem? I mean, or I should say problem. How did you manage through that? Because that's a real task, right? I mean, let's talk about. Give yourself a star for that one.
Well, what we did was I first made sure and looked at the finances to really see what the resources were. And the next thing that we did is we raised the starting salary. We did that for a few reasons. We wanted to take that as an opportunity to let people know we were serious about recruitment. I think different organizations and different professions, there is a narrative around what it means to be in a particular profession, what it means to be in law enforcement. And as we talked about earlier, these concepts, they evolve. And so we have to evolve with the world that we live in. So in Northern Virginia, that is has probably the highest cost of living in the country. Might still be behind.
Top 5.
Yeah, it might still be behind a couple places. but
New York,
definitely
maybe, but
and to your point, maybe it's sometimes, and the people that live in Northern Virginia certainly are not. They feel it, and so we had to be intentional about what we're dealing with. And in a smaller community, you also have to think about the types of things that you have to do in particular jobs. And so I think it was the intentionality and supporting the intentionality with the resources. And so on the starting salary side, it was increasing the starting salary. But from other aspects of the organization, we focused on improving tax collection to bring in additional revenues. We focused on looking at ways to refinance debt. We looked at ways of adding new streams of revenue, which we were also able to do. So all of these things play into having the ability. So those are the types of things that I mean about getting the house in order. So we know we need to have resources, but how can we bring more resources to the table that will allow us to put people in the community? And I'm always, my mindset on public safety is, I want to have a police department that really believes in community policing. So I think that from the manager's office, the first time that a citizen of Rocky Mount sees a police officer does not need to be when an incident happens. I tell everyone we need to be customer focused, and so people need to see us as a resource, and that goes across all agencies. But we got to be realistic about the expectations on public safety. Sometimes the only time you deal with public safety officials, it may be the worst day of your life, and that's your only interaction. So this is the mindset of those professionals that are in those roles, and so we have to have the resources to make sure that we can accommodate for all these nuances.
Yeah. Well, look, we've run out of time. I feel like we just started, but I
you
will
might
say
have to let me come back, man.
I want you to come back. I absolutely want you to come back. But the other thing is you're a proud new papa. I think that's exciting to talk about before we leave. I just think everybody needs to know that. And your lovely wife has joined you here in Rocky Mount. And we're just excited to have you. And I appreciate all the things that you've done in your past and all the things you're going to do for us. And
Absolutely.
I stand ready to help you any way I possibly can.
Well, Mayor, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
All right, now.